Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is me Simran. Today in this video, I'm going to be explaining you a very interesting topic of full stack web development, which is particularly the MERN stack. So definitely what is full stack development? So do not worry even if you are a novice to the field of full stack development. You must be hearing of various web technologies, right? Even if you do not know about the server side development, you might be hearing various web front end development, like even about HTML, CSS, right? I'm pretty sure those are the common terminologies you came across. So let me introduce you first to what is web development and the difference between web development and full stack development. So basically, if you consider making a web application, a web application does not just only have the front end. Front end is what the client as a user sees. So when you open any website, right, your favorite shopping website or any website, you see the buttons over there, the GUI interactivity, the buttons, the way you interact with the website. That is the client side, which you are able to interact as a user to on the website. But what about the backend? What you see is the front end, but on the back end there is some business logic which is applied, or some operations which actually take place, so that whatever request you are sending to the website by either clicking a button or making a request, that has to be actually authenticated by some internal process, which I also covered in my previous video in API. Like there is some kind of a communication to link the front end and the back end, right, through an API, which is application programming interface in software development. So the server at the back end is responsible for all the business logic, or applying some operation for producing a response in return or in reply to the request. So that is the concept. So when I talk about just web development can be either through any stack. It need not be just MERN stack. So basically, MERN stack is a very popular stack in full stack development. There are other stacks for developing web technologies or web apps as well. But talking particularly about full stack development, a full stack developer is a person or a developer, I would say, who knows not only the client side but also operates the server side. So he knows to build web applications, both the client side and the server side. So, and he must have the knowledge of API. So that is why in the previous video, as a standalone video, I created about API to introduce you how important it is in software development. Now coming to this video on full stack development, which many people, many watchers, I can see in my polls as well, are waiting for some topic related to web development. So that is why I decided to go with MERN stack, which is very popular stack. Now, what is this MERN stack? Let me introduce you that. MERN stack it's a combination of 4 technologies, which are MongoDB. M stands for MongoDB, which is a database. So now coming to what kind of database it is. Database is basically an organization of data where you are storing and organizing the data as a collection. So when you talk about MongoDB, it comes under a non-relational database. So databases are of 2 types: relational database and non-relational database. Relational database is a database which contains data in tabular format. Okay, there is a concept of tables in database there, but rows and columns there. But in MongoDB, which is a type of NoSQL or a non-relational database, you have data which can not only be tabular or structured data, but it can also contain unstructured or semi-structured data. So see, nowadays data is very unstructured. It can be either image data, audio data. It need not just be a tabular structured column format, right? It can be any unstructured or a semi-structured data, which is the real world data. So especially for those scenarios, to offer more dynamic in nature and to offer more flexibility and a more flexible and a dynamic schema which is not of a fixed size, we are going with non-relational databases. And for non-relational database, we use NoSQL language, which is not only SQL. Now, if you heard of the term SQL stands for Structured Query Language, which is a language to make queries and operate with the databases. I hope I have made this very clear to you. So MongoDB is a type of NoSQL database, and it is open source. And MongoDB basically is a NoSQL database. It is a document-based NoSQL database. Now, NoSQL databases are of different types. You also have the column-wide database. You have the key-value pair database, the graph database, and also you have the document-based database. So, document-based database example is MongoDB, which we are going to use in the MERN stack. Coming to what E stands for is Express.js. Express.js is a web development framework which is built on Node.js. Now it is built on Node.js and it is especially for making server-side applications, and it handles all the API calls, also, or some kinds of middleware functions, which are error handling functions, all the different functionalities for building and deploying your web applications. So that is taken care of by Express.js. Coming to next, which is React.js. This is very important. Now, see, I've talked about all about backend till now, right? Now, MongoDB is a database where you're storing all your data. Express.js is related to the backend part, where it is built on top of Node.js, and Node.js is coming to, it's related to backend. So you have the front end and the back end of a web application. Backend is for the server side. So for the server side, you're going to use Express.js and Node.js into simultaneously. Whereas for the front end, where you want to actually build the beautiful UI for the user to see and to interact, you want some kind of a dynamic environment or a user interface. So to build that, you're going to use React.js. Now remember, Express.js, React.js and Node.js are all JavaScript frameworks. They're JavaScript libraries. React.js, to give you a small history, it was developed by Facebook, and it is especially for building the UI. Or the user interface of a web application. Coming to next, which is Node.js. React.js is for the front end part, right? You're making it for the client side, but you are using Node.js for the server side, especially for the backend of the application. So it's a JavaScript runtime environment, which is Node.js. Now, I hope I have give you an introduction of what is full stack development, what particularly is MERN Stack, and what these four, terminologies are in MERN Stack. Of course, in full stack development, you have other stacks as well, like MERN Stack instead of MERN Stack. So MERN is basically MongoDB, Express, Angular. So now instead of React.js, you can also go for the UI or for the client side, right? Or for the front end of the application, you can go with AngularJS, or you can go with Vue.js as well, instead of React.js. And for the backend side, instead of Node.js, you can even go with PHP. There are different stacks available. You can also have something called as a PHP MySQL stack, where you are using PHP for the backend, MySQL as a database instead of MongoDB, and for the client side, you're definitely going with JavaScript, HTML, CSS. That works. So you see, there are different web stacks. What I mean is available, different full stacks which are available. So full stack is definitely what coming to the point of what is full stack development. It is both development, which includes front end development, back end of the web application development, as well as to link between the front end and back end, you have API, which is application programming interface, and you have a database involved for connection. And it's very important to connect the back end to the database, because the back end is performing all the server side operations, business logic. So that has to be connected to the database, so that whatever the user is interacting with the website through a request, that gets evaluated and updated, you can say, by the server, and the same gets reflected in the data of the backend of the database. So I hope that I have made this clear to you. Now coming to what is, to give you an introduction. So basically this particular, video on MERN Stack. Now I have decided to make it into parts, because this will cover both theoretical concept understanding. See, I cannot just show you and demonstrate the coding part. I have to explain you firstly what these terminologies are, what are the different features, because if you understand the concepts in each of these stacks, it will become very important to you, because React.js itself has so many concepts that you should be aware of. Like you have something called as a component based structure. What is DOM? What is virtual DOM? What are hooks? What are functional components? Class components, all those. And similarly for Node.js, Express, MongoDB, you need to be aware of each and every tech stack over here. Then that's why I've dedicated this video to the theoretical explanation, introducing you to the concepts which will be required for you in order to build a project in MERN Stack, starting from scratch, even if you are a beginner. That is the best part of this video. So do share with your friends who you think this will be very helpful. And coming to next, which is the next video I'm going to cover, is more about the practical demonstration, where I'll be explaining you, taking the VS Code environment, and I'll be demonstrating you live, that is showing you what the front end, the back end libraries are, why you need to import them, especially what version, something about how easily they can manage, and why we are importing some special libraries. There are special libraries like Axios library. You also have libraries like React Router DOM. There are some certain libraries which has to be installed. What are they? The process of installing them, how do you make directories, and so on. So this video is for the concepts part basically. So before delving into this MERN Stack, basically, I would like to just give you a brief, very small introduction of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which you should be aware of before starting MERN Stack. You should have the knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, what is HTML? HTML is basically hypertext, hypertext markup language, and it's basically for the structuring. It's for adding the structure to your web application or a website. And then you have the CSS, which stands for cascading style sheet, and that is basically for adding the styling or when I say styling, it's not only just the color, it can be the font color, font size, margin, whatnot. So these all it's having a different boilerplate code as well. You can have a look at there. So all these styling related properties are handled through the CSS. So you need to know what is CSS, the types of CSS. A brief overview of the different types of CSS. Basically, you can add styling to your web apps or the components of your code. Either basically you can do it inline CSS, internal CSS, or even external CSS. Coming to next, which is JavaScript. JavaScript is for adding interactivity or to make dynamic web applications. So when I told about buttons, the moment I started this video, I introduced you to web application. What I said was to add interactivity, right? When you are interacting with a website or a web application, that is why the server is going to react. So that is why this is the importance. JavaScript is very important because you need not always depend on static websites. So in real, practical life, if we are working on personal projects, start with making static web projects. But then what I meant by static is you don't have any interactivity there. You just, even if there's a button, it won't actually perform any action or an event. There is no event triggered. So you just have a static. All the components over there are static in nature. There is no interactivity. But where you have interactions with the user or make it more dynamic, that is why you're having a dynamic environment. And for that, to add dynamic web applications, you're going with JavaScript. In JavaScript, you have different, again, the web frameworks in JavaScript, namely the AngularJS, Vue.js, React.js, and also the Node.js and Express.js. So the list goes on. And there's again Next.js, which is recently introduced. So what is this different JavaScript frameworks and why are they used for is all going to be covered for the speciality of each JS web framework. Now, I hope I've given you a brief in a nutshell about HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Now coming to next, which is React.js. Now, React.js is an open source JavaScript library that is widely used for building UIs for web applications developed by Facebook. And it's why it's widely preferred by web developers these days is because of its high efficiency, scalability, performance. And it's, one important thing it has virtual DOM. Now, when I was talking about, DOM stands for document object model. That is especially in any web application. But what is this virtual DOM? It is basically in React.js, you have virtual representation of document object model, where instead of, rendering the entire page with the changes, it only updates the required part. So wherever there is a change, in case of any changes, is going to result in improved performance by only, instead of directly manipulating the entire DOM, it's going to create a virtual DOM and only updates the necessary parts where there is a change occurring. In that way, it's going to speed the performance also. That is virtual DOM concept. Then component-based architecture. This is a very important concept in React.js, especially because React itself is a component. It is based on component-based architecture. Now, when I say component-based architecture, it means it has a UI, right? It's used for building UI. So the UIs or the user interfaces are composed of reusable and independent components. Each component is reusable. That is why it's even because of its reusability and modular structure, it is highly preferred. Now, when I talk about component-based, it promotes the concept of building applications as a collection of reusable and composable components. They encapsulate both the UI and the logic related to it, making it easier to manage and maintain code. What is something brief concepts, I would say, when you're talking about React.js in particular, there is something called as JSX, which is JavaScript XML. Now we say when I was talking about HTML, you might be thinking that if we are using JavaScript or when you are using MERN Stack, do you actually need HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or can we only go with MERN Stack? Right, only MERN. It's not like that. They all are related. So when you are even working on MERN Stack, you need to know and you need to include the concept as well as the functionalities which are involved in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So how can you actually directly load or you can directly include the HTML tags, HTML elements in JavaScript code? That can be done by something called as JSX, which is a syntax extension. JSX stands for JavaScript XML, which is for JavaScript, allowing you to write HTML-like code within JavaScript. So within JavaScript, you can write HTML-like code as well. That is why it is this is something, a feature of React.js. Unidirectional data flow is something, which makes it even more popular because there is just a single direction flow from the parent component to the child component. You see, in React.js, there are two types of components: functional component and class component. So when I talk in particular about class component, you must be hearing about this term in OOPS, right? When I talked about object-oriented programming, over there you have the concept of parents and child classes. So when you have the parent class and the flow is going from the parent class single directionally to the child class, that is called as unidirectional data flow. Thereby, it helps in avoiding data inconsistency issue, and there is easier state management. Okay, so there is something called as a state in React. So in order to simplify the state or the state of the application, we are having unidirectional data flow. Reusable components is something which I've already covered, where you can use, where you have a component, it can definitely be used in other parts of the application. It need not just be restricted to be used in only one part. You can make it, components can have their own internal state, making them self-contained and modular. Then React hooks. Now, when you talk about, before, especially before 16.8 version of the React, there were no concept of hooks basically. So you only had class components, and class components, they have their own life cycle method, own state management libraries, especially for managing states. But when you talk about functional component, which was, came later on, now before, after the class component, functional components are unlike this class components. Class components, as the name says, it's extending from some class. The class is React component class. But unlike those class components, in functional components are simple JavaScript functions, that will be returning React elements. So since they are just JavaScript functions, you need some kind of functionality for them also to manage the state. Now that mechanism was not provided before 16.8 version came, but right after 16.8 version of React, when it was introduced, you had something called as React hooks, which came in, making it very flexible to manage state and lifecycle elements for functional components as well. Efficient rendering. Now, this is very important, making React very preferable to other frameworks. This is because, first is virtual DOM, that is speeding up the performance, which I already covered in the first point. Apart from the virtual DOM, it also identifies the minimum number of changes required for the actual DOM, resulting in efficient updates and improved performance. So it has efficient rendering, where it's only rendering, it optimizes the rendering by performing a diffing algorithm in the virtual DOM. Now, coming to next, which is community and ecosystem. React being very popular, it also has a vast and active community, third-party libraries available, tools and extensions, because wide range of options are available for additional functionality which simplify the development process. So any doubt, support you want, you can go through the React documentation, also interact with the wide community base it has to solve your problems, because it's very popular. Coming to next, which is components concept in React. Now, functional component and class component. Now, basically, what is this functional component and class component? Functional component, as I've told you, they are just JavaScript functions returning React elements. They are stateless components defined as JavaScript functions. What they have is something called as props. Props is another concept in React.js. Props are nothing but, you can think of props or property. Props is short form for properties. You can think it of as the functional arguments. So basically, the arguments or the parameters to a functional component can be termed as a prop. Now, functional components are easier to write, test, and understand. Coming to what is class component, functional components compared to the coding part, functional components are very easier compared to the class components. But class components, they are stateful components. I have explained you in my previous video of API. So do watch that, by the way, before starting MERN Stack. It will give you a very clear understanding of what is API, because I need not again repeat it over here. So when I talked about what is difference between stateful and stateless, I was explaining you, and I told you that REST API is a stateless API. Right. So what is that stateless and stateful concept? Is that stateful remembers or it stores the data, it saves the data from the server. But in the stateless, it need not actually save the data. It is dynamically going to ask the user for the client for the data. There's no data saving or storage process. In class components, there are stateful components defined as ES6, which is ECMA script. 6 classes that extend the React.component class. They have additional features like what we covered. They already have the lifecycle method, state management method. So you need not have the concept of hooks in class components, because they already have their own, they're able to manage their own state with a more complex logic, right? So whenever you need, there is a more complex logic involved, they come very handy there. React hooks make state management easy for functional components. Coming to Node.js. Now, basically, I would like to, divide this particular video. I feel that, people would watch more, you would be able to actually grasp the concept more in depth and understand, practice these concepts when I divide these videos. So let me just conclude this video saying about the React, giving you introduction of MERN Stack, which is in part 1 of this series. And I've also explained you the concepts, very important concepts of React JS. I'll be also showing you, demonstrating it in VS Code environment, all these components of React JS and also the other stacks as well. So for now, happy learning, and this was all about React.js. Upcoming video will be talking about Node.js, followed by Express.js, and then MongoDB. Then I will be demonstrating you practically about MERN Stack so that even the beginners can be able to, actually develop a web application from scratch or from the beginning. So stay tuned on my YouTube channel. If you found it helpful, do share it with all your friends. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and like, and feel free to comment with all your doubts. Thank you.